Norway is the second happiest country in the world, if you believe the surveys, and one of the great things about living there is it's really, really rich.
Case Nelson?
Merry Christmas.
I think we got ourselves an oil field.
Norway's $1 trillion wealth fund managed to rake in $20 billion last quarter. It's thanks to oil and gas stocks.
Every Norwegian has become a millionaire.
Norway, located in the far north of Europe, shares its borders with Sweden, Finland, and Russia. It has a population of only 5 million people. Now, it's a small country, but when you look at its wealth, it's anything but small. Norway has one of the highest per capita incomes in the world. In the 1950s, the country was still recovering from World War II, and most people made a living by fishing, farming, or working in forests. It wasn't a prosperous place at all, but now Norway is one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and it didn't happen by chance. So the question is, how did this tiny country go from struggling to thriving? What's behind all that wealth? You're about to find out. Stay tuned as we take a closer look at how Norway got so rich. Let's go back in time to the late 1700s. Norway was mostly covered in vast forests and primarily depended on farming and fishing to survive. At the time, Norway didn't have the infrastructure we see today. There were no advanced industries or bustling cities, just rural settlements across the country. Norway was far from the global industrial scene, and by today's standards, it was considered a poor and underdeveloped nation. Norway's economy was primarily based on agriculture, timber, and fish. Its agricultural land was minimal due to the harsh climate, and much of the population lived a subsistence farming lifestyle. Fishing was important, but catching enough fish to sustain the population was a significant and constant challenge. Even during those difficult times, Norway had several advantages. It had vast forests, abundant fish stocks, and a strong maritime tradition that helped the country in the long run. Norway was an expert in shipbuilding and had one of the largest merchant fleets in the world by the 19th century. Still, these early advantages were nowhere near enough to help Norway to achieve global prominence. But remember, the foundation had already been established. In 1905, Norway reached a major milestone. It gained its independence from Sweden. Now, Norway was free to decide its own path, both politically and economically. But freedom didn't automatically mean wealth. Back then, Norway was still considered an underdeveloped country. It was mainly relying on exports like fish and timber. Industrialization was in its early stages. The country wasn't a major player in the world in terms of e-economy. Still, with independence came a fresh wave of hope, and you could almost feel the energy shifting as the country looked ahead, ready to carve out its own future. When Norway moved into the 20th century, it started to develop a strong welfare system. Its leadership was well aware of the fact that investing in human capital was key to progress and development. One major step they took was to ensure universal suffrage. Its purpose was to ensure that every citizen had a voice, but it wasn't just about voting. It was also about rights. For example, workers' rights and education for every citizen. Norway was building a skilled but educated workforce. These workers were going to be an asset because the world was becoming industrialized. They were focusing on education, equality, and healthcare. So Norway planned for a future where its citizens would be productive and prosperous. At the same time, Norway adopted democracy at all levels. High taxes were levied. Citizens had benefits like access to healthcare, education, and a better quality of life. Now, let's jump to the period after World War II. Like most of Europe, Norway was devastated after the war. Nazi Germany had occupied it, and its infrastructure was in ruins, but here's where the story gets interesting. Norway was one of the lucky countries that received the US Marshall Plan aid to rebuild. But it didn't just get financial aid. The country also benefited from a highly organized and efficient labor movement that pushed for economic reforms, public sector development, and better wages. From 1945 to 1975, Norway's economy grew at a whopping 3.3% annually, and by the 1960s, the country was on a roll. Unemployment was nearly non-existent. Citizens were not facing inflation and similar problems. Now, Norway has a powerful and diverse economy. Now, here comes the part where things take a significant turn. It's the late 1960s, and the buzz around oil discovery in the North Sea is growing. Norway, though skeptical at first, began its search for oil. And in 1969, Phillips Petroleum discovered oil near the Norwegian coast. It was the moment moment that changed everything. Norway also discovered black gold and was about to become one of the world's leading oil producers. But here's the key. Norway learned from the mistakes of other oil-rich nations. Countries like Venezuela, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia were plagued by what we call the oil curse, massive wealth leading to corruption, inequality, and economic instability. Could Norway avoid this fate? Keep watching to find out. Norway was different from many oil-rich nations. Why? Well, it already had a strong democratic government and a social welfare system focused on accountability and transparency. The Norwegian government was determined to use its oil wealth to benefit everyone, not just a select few. Norway didn't just let foreign companies swoop in and take all the profits. Instead, the country nationalized the oil industry. Statoil, which is now known as Equinor, was a state-owned company. It was designed to ensure that the wealth generated from oil would benefit all Norwegians, not just the elite. This move ensured that the oil industry would operate in a way that served the public good. In the coming years, Norway will invest in developing its offshore drilling technology to refine and process infrastructure and petroleum industries. This meant Norway didn't just sell raw oil, it added value and kept a significant portion of the country's profits. Now, here's a truly important move. In the 1990s, Norway established the Government Pension Fund Global, one of the world's most significant sovereign wealth funds. This fund was created to save some of the oil revenues for future generations and ensure that Norway wouldn't become reliant on oil forever. As of November 2024, it had over 1.74 trillion US dollars in assets and held on average 1.5% of all of the world's listed companies, making it the world's largest fund in the world. The best part is Norway's ethical approach to investing. This means the fund focuses on sustainable practices and avoids investments in harmful industries. The wealth generated from this fund helps pay for healthcare, education, pensions, and other public services. Fast forward to today, and Norway is a global leader in industries like renewable energy, technology, and shipping. While oil is still essential, the country has diversified its economy and is reducing its dependence on fossil fuels. Norway is the world's 8th biggest exporter of oil. According to new data, it exported $58.9 billion worth of oil in 2021, which accounts for 4.06% of the global oil trade. In 2022, oil and gas accounted for nearly 50% of its exports. Norway's commitment to sustainability, education, and social welfare ensures its citizens enjoy a high standard of living. With one of the highest GDPs per capita in the world, Norway's citizens benefit from free healthcare, education, and pensions, creating a society with low inequality and high happiness. Norway's sovereign wealth fund continues to grow, ensuring that even after the oil reserves run out, the country will remain prosperous for future generations. Norway is also a leader in sustainable energy. While oil and gas brought initial wealth, the country is focusing on renewable energy for the future. Nearly 98% of Norway's electricity comes from clean, renewable hydropower. The country has capitalized on its abundant rivers and mountains for years to generate hydropower and ensure a clean energy infrastructure. Norway is on track to become a carbon-neutral country by 2030, with many initiatives focused on reducing emissions and increasing energy efficiency. In 2016, Norway's parliament approved this radical goal of achieving climate neutrality by 2030, 2 decades earlier than planned. Still, recent data reveals that the country will reach that goal quickly. They're even leading the way in the EV sector. According to a new report, of all the new cars sold in Norway in 2024, 89% were electric vehicles, EVs. The Norwegian Road Federation has revealed that all these cars were all electric cars, not hybrids. It's an increase from 82% in 2023, higher than any other country worldwide. Norway has consistently ranked high in education and innovation, 2 other factors contributing to its wealth. Education is free at all levels, including university, which makes it accessible to all citizens. Norway invests heavily in human capital to ensure that its workforce is highly educated and skilled. Norway's adult literacy rate is 100%, one of the highest in the world. The country ranks second in the Global Innovation Index, only behind Sweden. Norwegian universities are at the forefront of research, particularly in renewable energy, technology, and marine biology. Norway's government also funds startups and innovative companies, providing grants and incentives to nurture new industries. Another reason for Norway's success is its infrastructure. The country has invested heavily to build a modern and efficient transportation network to connect its bridges, tunnels, and ferries. Many of these infrastructure projects are not just for convenience, but for economic goals. For example, the Atlanterhavsveien, or the Atlantic Ocean Road, is a spectacular drive that attracts tourists from all over the world. It is just a single example of how the country's infrastructure enhances its economy and boosts domestic productivity and international tourism. Now, let's not forget how Norway's geography itself contributes to its wealth. It's a country with abundant natural resources like oil, gas, forests, and fish. The surrounding North Sea provides rich fishing grounds, contributing significantly to the economy. Norway is the world's second largest fish exporter, just behind China. Norway's strategic location gives it access to the North Atlantic and the Arctic Ocean, making it a main country in shipping. The country's ports, like Oslo, Bergen, and Tromsø, are the busiest in the world. These ports allow Norway to efficiently ship its oil, gas, fish, and other products to markets across Europe, Asia, and the Americas. So what lessons can we learn from Norway? The country's rise tells us that natural resources alone don't guarantee prosperity. Instead, how you manage those resources, invest in people, and plan for the future truly matters. Let's now hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching.